Go into your working folder and open up opacityblendingmodes.ai. We're going to talk about something that's technically not a part of the layers panel, so you can kind of get me on this one because this chapter is about layers. But let's go into layers and bring it out here. I want to talk about opacity and blending modes. And the reason I'm bringing it up now, because we are going to use them more in the following chapters, is because if you use a program like Photoshop, and I'm only making an assumption here, if you use a program like Photoshop, you're used to seeing opacity and blending modes as part of the layers panel. It's right up here, right up at the top. Where are they in Illustrator? They have their own panel. It's right over here, transparency. So let's bring that one out. Let's have a fun old time here and bring out all these panels. One of the questions that's asked is why? I mean, Photoshop has it as part of the layers panel. It makes sense. You know, I've been using it that way for 20 years. So why are they separate? Well, think of the difference between Adobe Photoshop and Adobe Illustrator. Adobe Photoshop is raster-based. It's paint on a canvas. Everything in that layer is controlled by, well, it's one big piece. In Illustrator, we deal with objects. It's not about the layer. The layer is there for control, but not to separate things necessarily. So in order for me to do something to something, I have to select it. You don't do that in Photoshop. So it wouldn't make sense to have blending modes and opacity as part of the layers panel, since we're not really technically controlling a layer, we're controlling an object. And once you get over that part, it's no big deal because they function about the same way. For example, I have this green circle selected. Let me shift-click on the red and shift-click on the blue. And let's go into a wonderful area. I love blending mode. I really do. They're so much fun to work with, and they are very creative. You blend elements together, objects in this case, based on those options. So let's say we go to screen right here. Now notice how it blends where they interact. Between the red and the green and the green and the blue and the blue and the red, you get a blending, a screening of the colors. And what you're actually looking at here are the additive and subtractive color sets. Red, green, and blue, cyan, magenta, and yellow, where they interact. If we select them again, and maybe try luminosity. You're looking at the luminosity values now and not the colors, so we get shades of gray if you want to do something like that. You could spend all day long on these things. I've taught entire classes on nothing but blending modes in Photoshop. They're amazing and they are very creative. Now down here, just to again give you a hint at what these things do, because we will talk more about them, is you do have the ability in a vector program to control the opacity of the item. If we come over to our eagle right here, and we could do a blending mode on him too, like maybe overlay. Doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter the object. Two objects can be blended together, two or more. Let's take him back to normal. I want him to kind of blend a little bit into that background by changing his opacity. So if we click here, notice you got a 0 up here. Ever wonder why you want a 0 opacity? We'll talk more about that later, but it has to do with masks. We're not going to do masks yet. We're just talking about these two. Well, let's make him about 60. Basically, what you're doing is you are slowly making him go semi-transparent, and if there's something behind him, it will begin to show. Blending modes and opacity in Adobe Illustrator. They weren't always there, but they function basically the same way on vector objects as blending modes and opacity function on raster objects in Adobe Photoshop.